Who will lead Europe now that Merkel has stepped aside? Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, where we help you upgrade your English with current events and trending topics. This is lesson number 423, and JR has uploaded the full lesson to plainenglish.com/423. Coming up today, Angela Merkel's legacy in Europe. We talked about her biography and domestic accomplishments on Monday, but the biggest impact of her tenure has been in the European Union. In the second part of the lesson, we'll review the phrasal verb step aside, and JR has a song of the week. Let's jump in. Angela Merkel, Germany's center-right chancellor for the last 16 years, stepped aside in favor of a new chancellor and a new governing coalition. Merkel chose not to compete in this fall's national elections. Her party, the Christian Democratic Union, suffered a poor showing at the polls and did not factor in the new coalition government. On Monday, we talked about Merkel's domestic legacy within Germany, but her impact as chancellor was more widely felt in Europe. While she was chancellor, the EU experienced several major crises. It survived them all, barely. No European leader at the national or EU level was more influential in holding Europe together by a shoestring than was Angela Merkel. For a bit of context, the European Union is an unruly coalition of 27 national governments, ranging from wealthy Luxembourg to the much poorer Bulgaria. It's governed by a thicket of treaties and agreements that often give a single member state the ability to veto a decision. Most of its institutions are consensus-based, meaning that for most issues, the EU moves at the pace of the slowest member. The EU's motto is United in Diversity. During trying times, though, the EU has been more diverse than united, and there were many trying times during Merkel's term as chancellor. First, the global financial crisis of 2008 exposed serious financial weaknesses in some member countries, such as Ireland, Greece, Italy, and Spain. The EU and the euro were at real risk of falling apart. To solve the crisis, the EU had to decide how to use the money of richer members, like Germany, to prevent a collapse in more spendthrift countries like Italy and Greece. The more industrious countries, the savers, didn't love providing emergency loans and bailouts to the more spendthrift nations. Not to mention, the less stable countries didn't appreciate the harsh strings attached to that help. Ultimately, Merkel was the driving force behind the compromise that held Europe together during this crisis. The saying goes, a compromise is successful when nobody is happy with the result. And trust me, nobody was happy with that result, least of all Greece, which suffered a long recession as a result. But Europe held together, and it was Merkel who used her influence to manage the crisis. Even many Greek leaders now admit that the punishing compromise probably saved the euro currency. Another crisis popped up when Britain stunned the world and voted to leave the EU. This was not just a Britain problem, it was a European problem too. The trick for Europe was to punish Britain enough so that no other member would want to follow, but also not totally ruin the relationship with an economically vital trading partner. This was a problem well suited to Merkel's strengths. She held firm in many areas and compromised in a few others. By the time Britain officially limped out of the EU in 2020, no other member states wanted to go through that ordeal. Merkel led Europe through other crises too. Europe has long been the destination of choice for migrants from the Middle East and Africa fleeing war and oppression at home. Migrants pass through border states like Turkey and even arrive on boats in Italy and Greece. In 2015, Angela Merkel made the decision to welcome over 1 million refugees and to reaffirm Europe's identity as a tolerant and welcome place, despite the political cost at home. Finally, during COVID-19, her last international crisis, Merkel led the way for the European Union as a whole to issue and back debt. Prior to this crisis, individual European countries had to raise and guarantee their own debt if they wanted to spend more than what they collected in taxes. Germany, which has long been fiscally conservative, preferred this approach. To put it simply, German savers didn't want to have to bail out less cautious nations whenever they spent too much. But Merkel eventually brought her reluctant country around to supporting common European debt. Early in the coronavirus pandemic, Europe took the unprecedented step to borrow money that could be spent giving relief where it was most needed. The debt would be guaranteed and paid back by Europe as a whole, not by any one member state. And this was an act of European solidarity that would scarcely have been imaginable early in Merkel's term. By the time the coronavirus hit, Germany had come to accept that its own health and security was tied up with Europe's well-being. That change in attitude can be attributed to Merkel's steady and competent European leadership over the years. Merkel's critics say that she saved Europe as it lurched from crisis to crisis, but that she didn't use her leadership to make durable changes that would prevent crises in the future. There may be some truth to that, but I think that criticism is a bit harsh. She was not the president of Europe. Nobody appointed or elected her leader of Europe. She was the elected leader of one of 27 EU countries. She didn't have any power other than her ability to persuade, cajole, and build compromise inside the EU's interminable institutions. The story goes that when Trump was elected, Barack Obama went to Europe and told Angela Merkel, "Congratulations, you are now in charge of holding the liberal world order together." And again, the story goes that she hadn't wanted a fourth term in office, but that she ran for it anyway because she didn't want to leave a power vacuum in Europe, just as Trump was coming to power in the US. Today's English expression is step aside. It's a phrasal verb that has a couple of meanings, but the most common meaning is to voluntarily resign or give up a position. In today's lesson, you heard that Angela Merkel recently stepped aside as Chancellor of Germany. She has held Germany's top political job for 16 years and has been in politics almost since Germany's reunification in 1990. But she chose not to run for another term in the Bundestag, Germany's parliament. And as a result, she stepped aside as chancellor when the new coalition government was officially installed. Often, when we use step aside, we're talking about a situation where one person is letting another person take the job or become the leader. We often use it when there is a logical time for a person to end their tenure, the end of a term, for example. Step down is what we would use if someone resigned from office before the end of a term, or if the person must resign after some kind of controversy. But if someone voluntarily allows another person to take a role or a leadership position, we use step aside. You don't have to be a political leader to step aside, but you do generally have to be a leader of some kind. Mike Krzyzewski is the men's basketball coach at Duke University. He's one of the most famous university basketball coaches ever in the United States. He has coached at that prestigious university since 1980, back before I was even born. But the 74-year-old said that he would step aside at the end of this season. That means he will voluntarily give up the job and let someone else take over the men's basketball program. He might retire or he might go do something else, but he is going to step aside as the head coach and let someone else take the job. The boss of a company can step aside. At a big company, the CEO can be fired by the board of directors. That's not good. The CEO can resign in disgrace if they presided over illegal activity. Or, and this is what companies hope, after a certain number of years, the CEO can step aside and let someone else take the top job. Will Warren Buffett step aside as chief executive officer of Berkshire Hathaway? A lot of people think he should. He's currently 91 years old and is still in charge of the investment company he founded. The number 2 person at Berkshire Hathaway is Charlie Munger. He's 97. So when Warren Buffett steps aside, it won't be Munger who takes over. Well, like most large companies, Berkshire has a plan for what will happen if the CEO retires or dies. The company has identified Greg Abel as the next CEO. We don't know if Buffett will step aside or if the nonagenarian will stay in the job for the rest of his life. It's Thursday, so JR has a song of the week. He's chosen Due West by Kelsey Lou. Due West. Due west means straight west, not west and a little north, not mostly west but a little south. Nope. Due west means straight west. And if you're in most places in America and you go due west, you end up in California. And that's what this song is about, going to California. Due West by Kelsey Lou is the song of the week, thanks to JR. And that's all today. Congratulations on reaching the end of another Plain English lesson. Remember, you can find the full lesson online at plainenglish.com/423. That includes the transcript, how-to video, translations, exercises, and more. We'll be back on Monday with another lesson. See you then.